Today we're going to make a wire wrapped cage shell pendant. You can see my cute little shells inside there and the cage is just holding it in place. I've got this little scallop shell here today. It's about 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. For a shell this size, I am just using about 12 inches of the 20 gauge dead soft silver wire. Then we can start to form it into the loop around your shell that's going to hold your pendant in place. I'm just going to make this pendant sort of like a teardrop shape, and just getting the sizing right of your loop there. So it needs to go right around the outside of the shell and be about 5mm bigger around the whole shell. Then holding it at the top where the wires meet, you're just going to bring each wire up straight, grabbing it with your pliers there and bending it up straight so that those two wires are coming up perfectly next to each other. Just making sure those wires are nice and close together. Then we're going to leave about 5mm from where the two wires meet, and then we just, with our round nose pliers there, grab it there and bring the wires one way, and then we wrap them around the round nose pliers the other way, just starting to form a little loop there. That will be our bail. Just while you're holding it there, bringing that wire down and then wrapping it around those few millimeters that we left at the bottom. We're just making that nice and tight, and then we can snip those tails off and crimp the wires down nice and tight. So that just forms our outer loop that we're going to now use to wrap our little pendant. I just grab my pliers and straighten it all up. Make sure you're happy with the loops and your bail there. It should be about the right size for your little shell to fit inside. You probably want to just check and hold it up against your shell or whatever you're wrapping in there, and just make sure it does fit right around and it is bigger than the shell on all directions. Then we can move on to the weaving part of the cage, which is going to hold your seashell in place. This part needs quite a bit of wire, and I'm using the 24 gauge wire today, and I'm using about 50 inches. I start at the top there by just holding the end of your 24 gauge wire down with one of the sides of the original loop, and then just wrapping it around the bail 2 or 3 times at the bottom there, and then you can bring it back across and just wrap it on top of both the wires there just to secure them in place. I wrap it around 3 times in between each connection just to make sure it's really nice and secure. Just cut that little tail off as well. If there's any tail there, you can crimp it down. So we are going to start to make one side of this wrap. So obviously our scallop shell is quite flat, so we're not going to need a huge amount of space in between the two sides. So we can pretty much just go ahead and wrap it with the wires pulled quite tight on each side. I just start by taking this 24 gauge wire across to the other side of your teardrop and then wrapping it around the 3 times. Try and work slowly with your wire. You don't want it to bend or get any knots in it or anything, so you really want to pull it all the way through each time you do a loop. So then I'm just taking it across the other side and doing the same thing. Just make sure each one is pulled nice and tight, and that you're keeping the shape of the teardrop in the outer loop that you made. Again, just 3 loops around, and then we're going to head back over the other side. There's no real set design at this part. You're just sort of taking it across, so it's going to make a nice even cage for whatever you're putting on the middle. You can just start to see where the design is headed and which parts have an opening, like a space there for you to wrap there to make it look even. Checking your wires every so often as you go along, and you just keep going until you have enough wire wraps on that side to hold the shell in place. You need to wrap enough of a cage on each side so that there's no gaps big enough where the shell can fall out. Obviously we've just done the one side first, so just checking that, making sure. Once you've done that, you can grab your shell and just pop it in there. Then we're just going to bring this wire around the other side and do the exact same thing on the other side, just wrapping it around 3 loops in between each one. And going to opposite sides of the outer teardrop shape to secure that shell in place. You can pop other things in these little cages too, maybe crystals or stones. It's a good way of wrapping things that don't have a hole in them. Obviously it's better if you use things that are flatter, but you can also use things that are a bit bigger, like crystal points or something like that. And you would just adjust the size of your wraps to include that piece that was a bit bigger, and obviously you'd make sure that there wasn't any big holes that your crystal could fall through. So obviously on this side you need to hold your shell in place so that it is going to be sitting in there where you want it to be, and you can secure it into the right spot. So just continue on again wrapping until your seashell is really nice and secure and you can see that your design is even. When you have secured your little shell in place and you're happy with your design and it's looking nice and even on both sides, then you just want to bring your wire back up to the top, and we're going to secure it onto the bail as well. Just checking both sides, making sure that you're happy with them. You can always do an extra wrap on either side if you need to. Then just bringing this wire up to the top and wrapping it around the bottom of the bail a couple of times. Then I'm just going to snip the end of that tail off, and we are just going to wrap it around one of the 20 gauge side wires just to secure it in place. So I just wrap that around 2 or 3 times and then crimp it down nice and tight. I'm just going to snip that little tail piece off, and that should be nice and secured. So it should be the same on both sides, and now you can work with it a little bit with your wires just to make sure that your bail is nice and straight and that your wires are sitting how you like them. And then you can chuck it onto a chain and enjoy it.